Now, more of Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Policy Institute, the only show directly addressing the problems and solutions for Illinois. Now, from AM 560, here's Dan Proft.
Dan Proft back with Cole Lauterbach, reporter for the Illinois News Network, on this edition of Illinois Rising. And Cole, we were just talking about issues with respect to thresholds for individuals to be charged with felonies. Maybe the thresholds need to be raised for petty theft or for nonviolent drug offenses. Another part of the whole discussion of criminal justice reform is the issue of reentry, the ex-offender programs that are often talked about. How do you reacclimate people who have gone away for some time to prison into civil society, such that they're not a danger to others, but also they have a productive path forward, and balancing. It's another balancing proposition. And to help us on that topic, we're now happy to be joined, by Gerard Robinson, who's a resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. He recently wrote a piece on this very issue of reentry reform, as it's termed. And Gerard, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So some things that should be considered at the state level, states knowing that most of their inmates are going to be released back into the general population, and what are things that can be done that are not being done to reduce the incidence of recidivism and kind of direct people, incentivize people to more productive behavior than the behavior that landed them in prison in the first place?
So, unfortunately, too many of them arrive in prison without the academic or job skill set needed to be a productive wage-earning citizen for a host of reasons. And many of them will not receive that in prison. And so upon leaving, they're still faced with some of the challenges. So there are two things I would do. Number one is to really focus on entrepreneurship. We know that there are at least 23 states in Washington, D.C., who are part of an effort to ban the box for ex-felons, and so that when he or she is applying for a job, the issue of their criminal record will come into play later in the interview process than at the beginning, which would often just disqualify them up front. So we've got to focus on entrepreneurship because they frankly need to have the skill set often to create their own jobs. I think of a program called the Prison Entrepreneurship Program in Texas. They do the exact thing of providing entrepreneurship. So that's part one. Part two is making sure that inmates can read above the 8th grade level in order for them to participate in the type of jobs that will be needed. So these are what I call back-end reforms that we can do, and some places are doing it better than others. But I'm glad to see both Democrats and Republicans talking about this in a way that makes sense for the nation.
Now, Gerard, you bring up the fact that these people need to be a little bit more self-sufficient when they get out because of the issues with the box, the felon box, and all of that. One issue that's been addressed here in Illinois is the fact that we need certifications to braid hair, and we need to allow the government to tell us what we can and cannot do. We need their permission. What has been your experience with the need to lift some of that red tape to allow these people that are going through these certification programs, these training programs while in incarceration to lead productive lives without the government standing in their way?
So I'm calling you from Washington, D.C. right now, a city where at one point there was a pretty onerous regulation on the number of hours that you needed to actually receive a license certification to be a hair braider. And in many times, the number of hours you needed were more than you needed to actually sell real estate. And so there are things that we can do to, A, lift the regulatory burden, but I guess that's number one. But number two is to bring common sense to play. A number of people who are self-sufficient as entrepreneurs who've left federal and state prison, frankly, have created their own businesses. And the worst thing we can do is over-regulate them and put them in a position where they're left with few options. Make no excuse, I don't think we should overlook behavior that's antisocial, But I do think there's a regulatory role that the government plays, and I think we should be smarter about how we address it.
What's the main hurdle to getting more of these entrepreneurship programs going, reading programs, as you suggested? Is it just the idea that it's a tough sell to say spend the scarce tax dollars we have on convicted criminals?
So when I published a piece on children of the incarcerated and a couple of others, some of the comments that I received, first of all, they did the crime, they should do the time. If they didn't want to learn when they were in school, it's not our fault. And so there's a segment of our population who believes, we've done our part. But we've got to get universities involved. And so the PEP program, or the the PEP program in Texas, they're actually aligned with Baylor University, so the inmates receive a certificate in entrepreneurship. You're in Illinois, and so whether it's the University of Illinois, Urbana, or Chicago, or whether it's the University of Chicago or other schools, social entrepreneurs should just make a link and say, listen, your degree has cachet. We have a set of people, if they meet certain criteria, they should be able to participate in your program. So some of this is going to, frankly, mean nonprofit and for-profit companies going to universities and brokering the kind of deal to make this work.
All right. He is Gerard Robinson, resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. A good piece on criminal justice reform, some of the highlights you've just heard from Gerard. Gerard, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.